Can you hear me now?
Guys, we had technical difficulties.
We think we're on.
For the first time-ish ever on the show. But we're waiting to hear confirmation.
We need confirmation.
Otherwise, we're just talking. Odd.
We're on.
We're on.
We're on.
Fantastic.
You can hear us.
Okay, now you need to mute yours. Fantastic. Yay, guys. We're back. Sorry.
Okay, we're back. So
we're
going to introduce ourselves quickly. AJ, Lisa, teacher educators. The show
is Teach Talk.
Authentic dialogue about teaching, learning, schooling, communities, students. We just did 9 minutes and 37 seconds
of nobody hearing us
with no volume.
It was brilliant, you guys. I'm sure
you'll never know. But and we took on this question.
Should we do it again? Let's do the question again.
We're going to be quick though.
Yeah.
We're going to get right back in.
Okay.
The question was, what are your thoughts on using food in the classroom for a lesson?
Right.
For example, bread to show layers of the earth. And the rest of the question was, some teachers like this, some teachers don't. And there was part of it about socioeconomic status and maybe kids not having food at home.
Right.
So to recap what we just talked about for 9 minutes, we're going to do it in like 2, I hope.
Yes. Use the food in your classroom.
First of all, novelty, engaging,
and
motivating, hands-on, kids are learning. Food's a great idea. There's lots of great ideas for teaching.
And there's ways to get that as a teacher that you don't have to pay out of pocket. So talk with your principal, talk with those who are supporting you.
Wait, we might not be getting sound.
No. We can hear it from our computer. We're on there. We're on there. I think maybe
we've got volume this time, for sure.
We've got volume.
I've got an outside device that tells me we've got volume.
We're good.
Try
Check
yours
your
again.
device, perhaps.
Anyway, so the food. The second thing we talked about was extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, which wasn't part of the question, but the idea that you either do things because you want to do them and you feel good about them, and there's a reason you recognize the reason you're doing them, and you want to, as opposed to doing them for some sort of external reward because there's a carrot, a stick, someone gives you praise. And what we were about to say was that yes, kids do need to learn to move from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation in schools. One of our ultimate goals as teachers in schools is intrinsic motivation. It should be one of our ultimate goals within the public school system in this country. And so bribery,
with food or anything really, but food for some reason gets us.
Candy.
Food. I mean, like, can I give this child an M&M because?
All right, sound is working on your end. We got someone chiming in.
Because he hasn't completed a math worksheet before, and I need him to complete this math worksheet, and I'm going to give him an M&M for every problem that he completes. There's something there that just does. I think where the rub is for me is it doesn't promote independence. It doesn't promote ownership of the learning. So maybe instead of, and this is a challenge, but maybe instead of looking at what the student is not doing, start with their strengths and their preferences and look at what you can do. So what is it about my instruction that isn't engaging the student? What is it about the way that we're presenting material that doesn't meet their preference? Or is it truly a motivation thing that's of greater need to address with the team?
And we'll share a resource about intrinsic motivation for sure. Something to think about. So food, for sure.
Engaging lessons, novelty, absolutely.
Bribing with food. Be careful about recognizing that kids come from different backgrounds where they may have been where they may have learned a lot about extrinsic motivation. Recognizing that the younger kids are different experiences. They're going to have to scaffold.
Yes.
If a kid only knows how to do something for an extrinsic motivator, you can't just be like, no more extrinsic motivator. Scaffolding.
Knowing your students.
Right. And Kohlberg's theory of moral reasoning actually is brilliant here. Maybe we'll share that too. Just the idea that that's part of how we learn to do things. Like we get to the point where we do things because we know they're good or because we know we want to, not because someone told us, but until we learn that something is good. And so that's our job as teachers. Okay. Now the bigger thing here though, I think, is the question about socioeconomic status. There's a question embedded within the question about we shouldn't use food in lessons because actually there's one more thing. You should also think about sugar. If you have really young kids, especially, but with any kids, like you hype kids up on sugar and
you're going to have some classroom management issues later.
Well, it's going to be harder for them to focus. And that's a very real thing. So this is not about like they get bad and their behavior is bad. hate that. No, sugar actually affects the body. Like it affects my body.
It
Caffeine,
absolutely does.
sugar affects the body. So be careful about the types of foods we're eating.
And allergies.
Yeah, and allergies we talked about earlier, 9 minutes and 36 seconds. Allergies, be careful about allergies. But to get to that issue about socioeconomic status, this idea that I'm using food in my classroom because these kids don't eat at home, or I don't want to use the food in my classroom because, or kids don't eat. I'm just going to go on this one. The idea that it's my responsibility to feed kids because they don't eat at home, or not to feed them because they don't eat at home, you're messing with some boundaries there. You're messing with some boundaries in terms of what your responsibility is as a teacher. Now, when I read the question, Lisa, can you help me make sure I read that part of the question properly, please? Just double click on it.
Yes.
Thank you, because I want to make sure.
See it up here in the space.
Yeah, I do.
The use of food while others discourage it because of
socioeconomic class and those students not having food at home.
So I don't encourage the lesson so that the students have an opportunity to
eat, or
if you're the one having to provide lessons focused on food because of the needs of
I need more
students,
context for this question.
Well, and you need more people. If there's a student who's truly not eating, you need other people on your side to get to the point where we can support them.
Yeah. But, in this, we talked in class. I talked in a class this week about providing jackets to families too, like making assumptions. And although those assumptions may be backed with evidence, I've had parents throw clothes back at me and say, "How dare you? How dare you take on this role or make an assumption? Or you're darn straight my kid doesn't have a coat and we're working on it and I don't need your hand-me-down. You're darn straight we didn't eat this morning and that's not your job. Don't you dare mess with my personal life." We've had parents be very thankful as well for those kinds of things. But your role as a teacher in teaching an academic lesson, I want to be careful with that. And if you recognize that a child has any need not being met, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're sharing 3 resources. For sure, if I'm not safe and well-fed and haven't rested, it's harder for me to learn. No question. But is that my role as a teacher to just save the world and fix everything? Maybe partially in the role of public schools, there's something there, but as a team. You said this so well.
You can't take it on yourself. You can't, for so many reasons, you can't take it on yourself.
Get the counselor involved, get the principal involved, find out what's really going on as opposed to what you think is going on. Don't. And I guess at the end of the day with this, if I understand the question properly, I give 2 very succinct answers. One is, I would love if you found novel and engaging ways to work with students in classrooms. And if food becomes a part of that, great. 2, if you are bringing food into the classroom because you are worried that a child is starving at home, there's a much bigger issue here.
And you need to connect with other people.
With the team, And I guess the third one is you should always be looking to intrinsically motivate. So I'd be less worried about, should I do this great engaging lesson that I found connects to standards and will give me great evidence of student understanding and learning and have them really enjoying learning and being engaged with food or not? If all those things are present, I'm engaging kids, I'm differentiating, they're learning, they're developing, we're all, And then the other question is, if I have kids who I'm fairly certain aren't eating at home, or I'm making some assumptions, or I think I know something about their socioeconomics, get help.
Get help.
Work on it.
And it's so hard, you guys. You'll want to bring in coats. You'll want to bring in
Mm-hmm.
coats. You'll want to bring in food. You'll want to have snacks. You'll want to do all those things, but it has to be run through your principal, has to be run through the families. And you cannot be all, what did we say last week? You cannot be all things for all people at all times.
Boom.
And
New
you have
tagline.
to preserve for yourself.
Hashtag.
Okay, should we go to the next question here?
Yeah, we should. I think we covered that one, and I hope we did answer what you wanted us to answer.
Okay.
Ooh, I got it.
Question, y'all.
And again, we said this before when you couldn't hear us. We don't see these questions beforehand. We purposely don't look until we get them. What do you see as our school system's biggest flaw? And what have you, AJ and Lisa,
as individuals,
Lisa and
wow,
what have you done to change it?
Our school system, so that I'm assuming we're speaking public school system's biggest flaw, and what have I, as Lisa, done to change it?
I'm ready. But
you are? Yeah. You're ready? Wow. I'm jaded by the actual work that I do in the public school system, which is teach special education teachers. So I'm coming from a very special ed system perspective, which has since the day of inception been unfunded. And I think the perpetual need that I see for you know what, I'm going to change my answer. I was going to go with resources and the lack of resources, which seems to be this theme that we hear so much. You know what I'm going to go to is teacher preparation, because that's what I'm a part of, and that's what I actually believe is our biggest area of need. Is if we are not preparing teachers well, it doesn't matter what you have or what you don't have in the classroom, not a lot is going to be happening. So I think the thing that I do is I come to work every day and I take my job very seriously, and I love what I do, and I interact with others who love what they do so that I can be better. Guy, so that I can be better, so that, because I understand the multiplying effect of our job, and that is a beautiful yet very weighing part of the position that we play at this university, is that I'm not just teaching one teacher who might be teaching a handful of students. That teacher is going to teach a new set of students every year, year after year, for potentially decades of their life. That's hundreds, if not thousands of students that at some point I had the blessing to be able to impact that teacher for. So the thing that I do is I show up to work every day, and you know, and
you just don't show up. You show up with a ton of passion and energy, and
you've got to.
And you do the hard work behind the scenes.
You've got to.
And the research. I'm saying that about you.
Right. Thank you. Right. Yeah. Because at all times, the P12 learners are on my mind at all times. P12 learners are my focus at all times. And I love my students the way that my students will love their P12 learners. And that goes a great deal into the work that I do. So I don't think that it's a flaw. I just think we really, really need to continually focus on how we're preparing teachers, particularly special ed teachers who are a dime a dozen and so very valuable, and we need really good ones. And we have 45,500 in their positions currently in the U.S. who are not qualified for their job. There's a problem there,
to say the least. I'm going to segue off of that. And my answer hasn't changed, but sometimes it does when I listen to you first, because you say brilliant things. I'm resistant to the word flaw. I think I heard you say that. But I will say this. I think we as a nation have either lost our focus on what the purpose of schooling is. Right. We were never really sure, or we currently aren't sure writ large what those purposes of schooling are. I think the last question speaks to that as well, or our last answer speaks to that as well. So if I see if I have a concern, if there's a flaw, it's we're spinning our wheels a little bit as a system, with a lack of clear understanding as to where we're going, what we're doing as a nation, because there's that connection between a democratic nation or a republic, if you will. We could have that conversation too. And what the role of the public schooling system is. So, so I don't mean to get overly philosophical about it, but the focus on students, the focus on caring, relationship, connections, I feel that very deeply. It's one of my values. It's what I think ought to be going on more often. I was encouraged this year to see, I think, more school districts that I'm associated with harping on or focusing on caring relationships, building communities and whole students, rather than what I've heard for years, which is a focus on scores and numbers and data and tests. Not that that stuff isn't important. So I guess I'm choosing my words carefully as I say. What do I choose to do? How do I do it? I think through teacher education. I came to teacher education. I don't want to say accidentally, but the path led itself there. I wasn't seeking this position. In this role, I've come to believe strongly that there's a lot of hope in teacher preparation. And there's a strong movement in this country to privatize education, to do away with teacher education programs. There's a lot of this is obviously political. And I'm on a soapbox a little bit, but teacher education, having these conversations now, that question you asked shows a thoughtful individual, hopefully going into teacher education or already teaching. Someone who's concerned about what is our purpose, what are we doing, and how are we doing it? So by preparing teachers, by focusing on this, by being involved in communities. So if I were to kind of translate, what do I do? And then say, what ought you to do if you asked me to tell you what to do? I think getting more involved in communities. I think we have to be
Right.
involved outside our classroom. I think
Right.
within our classrooms and with our parents and peers, principals, all those P's, but our colleagues, we need to have more explicit conversations.
Mm.
We need to be more purposeful about why we're
Yeah,
doing what we're
right.
doing. We have an opportunity as educators, and I really believe this. So sorry for my soapbox. I'll get off it in a moment. We have an opportunity as educators every single day
Every day.
to interact with a ton of people,
Right.
and influence how we interact with them, how they interact with others, and how we all interact with the world.
Right.
We could open the book, read from the script, and move forward. We could skip the current news article. We could not deal with relations and emotions and controversial topics.
That's easier.
Or we can.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ask me what I'm doing, I'm trying to do that on a daily basis. This
Right.
show is one of our attempts to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I went on a rant yesterday in a class where I was like, guys, I'm not trying to pitch a particular political position or a red or a blue or whatever. I'm trying to promote dialogue. I'm trying to promote more authentic and explicit dialogue and not dancing around issues.
Right.
But if that is a
Stance.
if that is a political, then so be it. I guess I am.
Right.
But
Right. I think what both of us are speaking to, and I'm actually really glad that the viewer asked, what have you done about it? Because in general in my life, what I have been taught to do and what I believe strongly to do is what you can do. That you don't let the barricades, the things around you,
distractions.
You don't let them
illusions.
distract you from what you can do. And so I think that's why I changed my question from, there's an obvious lack of resources, particularly in special ed. Yeah, so that's why
But you do it through special ed too, specifically.
Right. But I think why I moved away from that initially, because it's very easy to say, lack of resources, that's not going to stop me from being a really great teacher, because that's maybe intrinsically what I find value in. So,
but defining what a really great teacher is and what a really good school is the crux of this issue, right? So I think funding is an issue. I think, and I want to finally say, I'd like to change the question. I don't know about the school system's biggest flaw or the thing I'm most concerned about. I don't think that schools should be asked to bear the burden of society
or of raising the children of our society.
Sure, but so the real problems in schools that we might talk about have to do with funding. They have to do with inequity and inequality based on race, socioeconomic status, those kinds of things. Culture, socioeconomic status, country of origin, native language, those types of things. Those aren't school issues. I mean, they are.
They come into the school.
Those are the United States of America societal issues that also exist in schools. What a lot of people want is, hey, let's fix them in schools and it's going to change everything. Our sound is on. I'm just being obnoxious.
Right.
This needs to be both and. Schools do need to address this. Teachers, we need to address this, and we're doing it. We also need to address it politically in those arenas, socially in those arenas in our communities. I don't think, and this is not. I mean, it's definitely not Pollyanna, right? But it's I'm not giving up. I don't think schools alone can do this, and I think that's a misconception. And it's putting way too much of a burden on schools. Hey, fix everything, or something didn't work. School's fault. Come on, come on. This is much deeper. The media and the family and the church and they have a lot of influence. So I'm getting fired up now a little bit.
That's okay. We'll maybe wrap it up a little bit. But no,
obnoxious. One of our listeners just called me obnoxious.
I think
you want authentic talk. No, obnoxious.
I think what we're both kind of speaking to is the fact that we believe to take it on yourself to take action, to not sit back and
have self-care within that, and have self-care
within that, balance within that. But balance. But anyways, I think there are many things that we could see as flaws, but honestly, if we see them as flaws, we're going to burn out and we're not going to come back the next day.
Deficit thinking.
Right. It's deficit thinking rather than growth mindset.
But I do think that it's bigger than schools. And so when we talk about what we've done to change it, we're trying to highlight that.
In this one area of my life, I do something completely different when I want to be a better wife or a better mom. I mean, those are all things, this is one area of of our lives, but we try to do it well here so that we can make that impact on others.
Let's keep having this. Let's take one more question,
and
let's keep having this particular dialogue because I think it's brilliant, and we need others to chime in.
Right.
You don't need to just send questions. You could send comments, please.
We'd like to share your comments.
Beyond obnoxious. Tell us what you're thinking right now.
Okay.
There are a lot of students in my 6th grade classroom who are unmotivated. After lunch is math time, and many students refuse to work and say, "I just want to go home," or "I'm tired. I don't want to do this." Do you have any suggestions on how to handle or what to say to a student that tells you that? This connects back to our first question.
Yeah. Motivation.
It's about motivation
for
and
sure.
engagement.
But first, like, let us just say you are not alone. This happens at every age, at every stage, at any time of the day or the week.
Sometimes I don't feel like doing
my work. Us. Sometimes
especially after lunch.
I want to take a nap at 3 p.m. and that doesn't go away. But it's how I get myself and my strategies to the point of understanding there are more important things to do maybe than take a nap that day, maybe. Gosh, motivation is tough with kids. It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
So and again, this is, this is live. We never see these questions in advance. So
wow.
We're both thinking, but I will say this, there's another misconception in schools, I think, and about teaching, that teaching is about controlling people.
Right.
And I say that not obnoxiously. And so I'm tongue in cheek, not obnoxiously, but wholeheartedly and with a lot of empathy. Sometimes we have to switch our mindset. We can exert certain amounts of control over environments.
Right.
We can't control people. I think that any people who believe they can control any people through reasonable means that have any connection to human rights and right. I think you're wrong. Actually, I'll go that far.
People?
Yeah, and I don't think that should be anything that you want to do. So when I look at this and I have a bunch of 6th graders after lunch who say, "I don't want to do work," part of me is going, "Suck it up, Buttercup, you gotta do work." And the other part of me is going, "Okay, let's explore that a little bit. Like I need to know where you're coming from, where you're at. I need to have a pedagogy of care to some extent in that moment, and I probably have to do something different proactively." Now, some simple answers are don't teach math after lunch. Yes. It is something that requires a lot of brain power. Not that all the work we do doesn't, but some people will say math, that the analytical skills that we need in math, maybe that's something we get done in the morning, and that after something like recess or lunch, we need time to wind down a little bit. That's maybe time for something that's discussion based or reading based or a little bit not less intellectually engaging, differently intellectually. So knowing our kids. It
goes back to knowing their understanding and how they're developing physiologically.
Well, and what do they want to do?
Right.
Like beyond
their motivation.
Beyond go home, right? So like we could have the argument, just kids can say they want more cake. Doesn't mean we're giving them more cake.
We've talked about that before.
But knowing that they want more cake gives you a starting point to meet them where they're at. Right. The idea that we have to do math after lunch, I'm going to force you to do math, is actually the flaw. Not your flaw, a flaw in the system, a flaw. We have schedules and we have time.
Which makes it tough when you have schedules and the whole school is doing math after lunch and you're trying to stay on schedule.
So reconceptualizing how you're going through the day, talking to them like, "Hey guys, math is not optional, right? So there's some things here. I need to control the environment to this extent. We are doing math.
Right.
When we do it, even how we do it, how long we do it for, chunked out, some of those things maybe. We could negotiate, we could work on. We also have to do this, we have to do this. So 6th graders, engaging 6th graders in how they schedule their day. Have you ever done flexible seating is like a hot topic right now, but have you ever done flexible grouping in teaching where you've got those 4 or 5 main, I've seen kindergartners do this, so 6th graders can definitely do it. As a teacher, you've got to be ready to teach small group. You might have to have the assistance of a paraprofessional or someone else. So there's some things that need to be in place. But the idea that a student can come in and look at a Velcro board, and you're going to teach the math lesson 3 times in a day, or language arts lesson 3 times in a day, and they get to choose. Like they come and put their name, and when there's 3 names on this board, I hope this is making sense. You've got a board: math, English, science, social studies. I've oversimplified, and they've got their little felt names, and they come in the morning and go, "Yeah, I feel like math first thing today. I feel like math after lunch today." And as each group fills up, look at that. We've got 5 groups of 4, and I'm teaching math 4 times, but everyone's chosen student choice. So,
and we have a couple of people chiming in, which is fantastic. Once
it's a middle
one
school.
Viewer suggested math centers, so maybe something more engaging where they move around. Change the access points to math. So how are the students actually accessing the content itself and then feeding you back.
And then this question, for sure. So
right.
I was thinking about a context within which you could
right.
do that. In a junior high or high school context,
right.
you teach math, that's your period.
Right.
Tough cookies.
Right. This viewer said, but through middle school and high school, would you change how you approach teaching math at different times? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back again. If you understand the way that a student's brain develops, and like that is one of the biggest things that we should encourage teachers to understand, is actually the physiological work that goes into the stages of development for our students, because they're still very, very right-brained, emotional, not logical very much until they get, like 25. So anyway, so understanding how their brain works and where they're coming from, knowing your students and knowing yourself as a teacher will all go into how you're better meeting their needs. And ask them. Yeah. Ask your students.
But you've got 45 minutes after lunch, right? So you have to work through it with them. I definitely I have this conversation a lot with students, with student teachers and first and second year teachers, like, man, my 8th period class, or man, my 1st period class.
Right.
Yep.
Yes.
So although in theory we only have X amount of preps per day because I could prepare one lesson and teach it 4 times. Yeah, that's a great theory. Here's another theory: meet student needs. Right? That's obnoxious.
Know your students.
Know your students and meet their needs. So 100%. And I love that the listener wrote this in. You might have to change how you teach math right after lunch. 8th period, 1st period. And then it depends on you can't always teach 8th period the same. It depends on who's in those classes. So,
knowing your students is going to be huge in that way.
But I would engage them in, what do you need, right? So yeah, you want to go home. I hear you. I want to go home too. Right. So connecting with them. But we've got to do this. So how can we do it? I honestly, that's not pie in the sky. That's not Pollyanna. Like, I ask students, how can we do this better? We have to do it. We don't have it. We don't have a choice. I'm not trying to control you.
Right.
We're part of a system. And maybe I talk to them about that too. What's our purpose here? Why are we here? How can we do this differently?
I think you connect with them too and say, yeah, you guys, after lunch is really tough for me sometimes too. I just ate. I got to sit down and do a couple of things, and now my body is just a little tired. So how can we take part in this together? Yeah. Well, and sometimes, like, if students are coming back in from recess, they don't need to be heightened. They need to be lowered. So understanding the difference in their body.
Some quiet, tactile time.
Yeah. So understanding how you can meet where they're at to kind of counterbalance where they need to be.
And also maybe not treating them as a group, which I think the one listener speaks to here, noting that some of them are just fine to work.
Right.
And that they might work in different ways. And so the whole group learning idea maybe has to go out the window. That paradigm of we teach the whole group in one way and I have 45 minutes, so I'm going to lecture. That's got to change, right? And that's not putting that on you, the listener, or the person who asked the question, but that's what we want you to think about. That's the paradigm. That's why we're having so much trouble meeting kids' needs, because we want to do it through one mode of instruction too often.
Oh man, yeah. And we often think of students' abilities and the things that students like to do, but we don't often look at the way in which they learn and their preferences for how they learn. If right after math or right after lunch or for math class, they prefer to learn audibly, or they prefer to express themselves.
And again, if one prefers to learn
orally, to understand the different preferences for how they're intaking and how they're outputting their knowledge. And so understanding that you're going to have any number of learners who prefer different things, and that can be a different way of grouping. It doesn't have to be an ability level grouping. It can be preference for accessing and outputting their knowledge and information. So being comfortable looking at your own teaching too and saying, where do I need to change? And maybe I'm not comfortable with this, and maybe it's not how I prefer to teach, but this is how the students are going to benefit most. And you know what? That'll probably end up being the way you prefer to teach, is when students learn the best.
Yeah, and part of that is focusing less on teaching and more on learning. Right. It's more on student engagement. I think part of that also is building relationships and trust with students. So that takes time. But sometimes, there's a student who says that and you have no connection with, and it's over, right? There's a student who says that and you do have a connection with, and you could move past together. So I think there's a lot of proactive work. And the other thing I think needs to be focused on more in classrooms in general, and it would help here, is focusing on the why, right? So I end up talking about that a lot. Why are we doing this? Why does this matter to me? And you hear it in math often. I mean, you hear it in other content areas too.
Right.
But why are we doing this? Like, really, how is this applicable to my life? You have to make it meaningful. So you might have to bring in pop culture. You might have to bring in things that they care about to help motivate. Project-based learning is a great way to do this, and it's a different way to teach your math class, right? So thinking about PBL, right? Thinking about there's so much there. Again, we've got we actually have to wrap up, but we've got another person chiming in, so I want to honor that, and then we'll wrap up. The listener says, I'm struggling with how to teach an engaging math lesson where we are having conversations and expanding on the content, but within the time block. How do you prioritize between needs and content? I prioritize needs.
You prioritize needs over content. I had a conversation with this particular candidate the other day, and it's that idea that we have to get through the scope and sequence. We have to get to this point.
Focus on the task rather than
focus on the unit. Yeah, and you're never going to get there unless you meet student needs first. And that's kind of a tough thing to say, though, because we have a lot of things we need to get through by the end of the year. Our co-teachers are getting through so much more content than with their students than we are with our students. Or we have this test that they have to take at the end of the year, and they have to know all this content knowledge. Okay, but if they know it like this and they don't know it like this.
This is a very real issue, not just developmentally for a student teacher or first-year teacher, but I think for all teachers. So I want the listener to know that. Take a breath, right? This is very real, both the after lunch thing and the I'm caught between this. I've only got this much time and I've got to get all this stuff done. We want to encourage you to let go of I've got to get such and such done to an extent. Focus on kids first. Focusing on and with their needs will actually comes back around. And a lot of research shows that, right? That if you have those two classrooms, one that jumped right into chapter 1 on day 1 and one that spent a week building classroom community, relationships, trust before getting near the content, that
they're going to get through more.
They actually get deeper and the kids learn more and they hold on to more over time. So although it looks like, oh my gosh, they're on chapter 2 and I'm only on chapter 1. It changes.
Do they know chapter 1?
Well, and do they care?
Understand, apply, have they connected? Is it authentic?
Yeah.
So when we go back to the motivation question, some quick things you can probably do now, looking long term, ask your students questions. Ask them how they prefer to learn and look at different ways of presenting content, not only based on ability, but look at their preference for learning and their learning styles.
And I would say simplify your objective. Connected to that, simplify your objective. I think oftentimes we try to do too much. Right? So we need to get here today and sharing that with them. And why are we trying to get there today? What are we trying to understand? What am I going to accept as evidence of it in this 30-minute period, whatever it is, right? And so so starting there and keeping it simple, instead of 7 objectives, 1, sharing it, and then finding ways to get there through the meeting of their needs. Right. But you got to know where you're going, and so do they.
We had somebody respond.
People are going to keep us on the air all day.
Love it. People responded. So they said, I think understanding in the material will lead to better understanding later and quicker comprehension too in the future, especially in math. So that idea of how do I prioritize? You prioritize student needs. Period. And then you look at your content. If you plow through, particularly with that's just content. That's just content, not
but it's hard as a teacher. I'm supposed
to, all these things coming.
I'm supposed to teach, and I had to get through this lesson.
Okay, well, what is teaching then? Is teaching getting through the lesson, or is teaching having your students comprehend, understand, connect, and engage in an authentic way?
And again, differentiation. Let's end on differentiation. And thank you guys for chiming in. This is what we want. This is real dialogue back and forth. But differentiation, realizing that you're going to have to scaffold differently for different kids within that period of time. If that's not being done,
know your students.
But if that's not being done, it makes it really hard. So small steps,
and ask for help.
Simple objectives, and ask for help as you're doing here. Okay, authentic dialogue, teach talk again. Can we high five? I like that one.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. We'll erase that video. But
write more in, send more questions. Let's continue those conversations, those exciting. And others. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
Have a great day,
and a great
weekend.
day, you guys. Okay.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Teach Talk.